Okay, so we're holding in the Book of Iyov, chapters 34 and 35. Just a few more sessions and we're done with the book. Elihu is the main star right now. Very intelligent fellow who's attacking this whole topic from a totally different angle. Apparently he's knowledgeable, he has experience, and he's divinely inspired, as we said last week. So he addresses Iyov's most important complaints, because apparently, until now, what Iyov heard from his other friends was not satisfactory. On the contrary, he rebutted them. He had some very good explanations as to why what they're saying is not sufficient to convince him. Elihu is a lot more powerful, is a lot more convincing, gets straight to the point, and he says obviously things that were not said before. Even though what the friends said was not completely wrong, it was missing something. And that's what he is providing here, some missing information, and he does so in a very, very powerful way. Everyone has their style of communicating, and he's very good at it. So he begins with addressing the first issue, one of the first issues that bothered Iyov, and that is that you cannot say that Hashem is really involved in what's happening in this world in detail. In other words, that divine providence actually is involved in everything, or is aware of everything. Because then, what this would mean is that you will be attributing to God anything that happens to a tzaddik, with anything that is no good. You would be attributing that to God, and God would know is just, and He does things right. And it would not be correct to say that this is all from Shamayim, that this is from heaven. For a tzaddik, for a righteous man to be suffering. So it must be, that was Iyov's conclusion, one of his conclusions, that Hashem removed himself, like some actually believed in the past. He removed himself, he created the world, of course, but he removed himself, he's no longer involved, at least not in the details, in every individual's life. And what happened instead? He gave it over to a system of mazalot. There is mazal, there is this zodiac, there's the system in place that manages everything that happens in the world. Now, this is true. This is definitely true, that there is a system of mazalot that definitely has some degree of influence. But the way Iyov was presenting it is that this system took over everything, and this system is not so smart, does not distinguish between the righteous and the evil. Just, it gives out, it hands out a mazal. You're born in that mazal, and regardless of your deeds, it does not consider. So what this means that a righteous man or a wicked man would have the same kind of fate. Bildad, one of the friends, had already responded that that would not be fair, that this would also be evil, that this would also be wrong, to treat everybody the same. And Iyov seemed to be saying that this would not be completely wrong, because the earth is such a small place, it's minuscule compared to the big universe, and it just happens to be that that's the way nature works, that everybody is caught in the net, righteous or evil. It wouldn't really make that much of a difference as far as the system that Hashem put into place, because it is not that important. It is minuscule. In other words, you can't say that this is so detailed that it would make such a difference, that your deeds would make the difference. No, this would be completely acceptable according to Iyov. So Elihu pretty much reviews that argument that Iyov made, and especially taking into account that Iyov doesn't deserve, at least that's what he believes, this kind of suffering. He's after all righteous. In other words, according to you, Iyov, there must be some other system in place. And this other system does not distinguish between the tzaddik and the rasha. Before we go on, however, I do want to say that there's some truth to that point. There is such a thing that sometimes when a decree comes out from above, from heaven, the mashchit, the destructive angel, does not distinguish between the righteous and the evil. At times when there's a terrible decree, people die. People are caught up, and they could be righteous. They could not be deserving of what is happening, but because they happen to be at that place at that time, the malach HaMashchit, the destructive angel who's sent on this mission does not distinguish, and everybody gets caught. Therefore, to be saved from such a situation, you need tremendous merits. You need tremendous hashgacha from Hashem to watch over you. As the Rabbi of Belz, of blessed memory, who survived the Holocaust in a miraculous way, after he got out, he said, whoever survived, it could only have been because two angels were watching over him. In other words, it was such a terrible decree that it was very difficult to survive. Imagine, even if people were not directly attacked, there was this fear that they had. They didn't know where to go, where to run. Some people were lucky. We call it lucky, but it's all, of course, it's all from Shamayim, that they escaped, that they ran out on time, that they hid, that someone who was not Jewish had them stay over. There was all kinds of stories of how people survived the war, but it was because Hashem enabled it, facilitated it. It's a miracle. This was a time of a terrible decree. The Holocaust was a terrible decree. And of course, there's destructive angels that are involved. When we talk about a destructive angel, we usually mean a plague, an earthquake, perhaps some sort of storm. Here we're talking in the Holocaust about evil people. Still, in some ways they act as messengers. In order to be saved from a human being, not from an animal, you need special merits. Special merits. You don't want to be caught in the hands of a human being, because he has free will. And the Zohar says to be saved from someone that has free will, you need many merits. It's possible. Hashem will protect you. His gun will jam, as it has happened. From an animal, it's a lot easier, because animals just operate by instinct. So they are complete messengers. If Hashem doesn't want you to be killed, bitten by an animal, then it won't happen. From a human being, it's a completely different story. So there is some truth, some validity to this point that there are destructive angels, mashchit, sheno mavchin ben tzaddik l'rasha, that does not distinguish between the righteous and the evil. And in order to save yourself from that, you need special merits. So Elihu addresses that, and he says that that's not so. This kind of an approach to say that the system in place does not make any distinction between righteous and evildoers. On the contrary, this kind of an approach will strengthen the position of the evildoers, of the heretics, who claim that there's no din, no dayan, there's no judge, there's no judgment, you have no reason to fear, no one's going to go after you, there's no direct involvement of Hashem in this world. So Elihu says to Iyov, the way you dealt with this issue is contradictory. In other words, your words don't add up, they don't make sense. Because on the one hand, what you're really saying, and the reason you came to this conclusion, is because to you it does not make sense that Hashem will do something like that. This is not the character of Hashem, who's just, who's perfect, to punish the righteous man. In other words, it doesn't add, right? That's why you said what you said, that it doesn't make sense that Hashem will do that. And therefore, your conclusion was that it must be a system in place, not Hashem. But you know what? Your conclusion makes it worse, because this would be a greater injustice for Hashem to do that, to give it over to a system that would not distinguish between the evildoer and the righteous man. Here you're saying, oh, Hashem would never do that. That's not the way he does things. He would not punish the righteous man. It must be a system in place that's doing it, that doesn't know the difference between good deeds, bad deeds. But what you're saying is worse, because if Hashem gave it over to a system, and that system doesn't distinguish, that means it's not just one individual that's going to suffer, it's many people that may suffer as a result of a system that does not make any distinction between the evildoers and the righteous. The commentaries give a mashal, a beautiful parable. A king, a dictator, a very bad dictator, committed certain wrongs against some very good and generous people. And as a result of that, he got a reputation of someone who's evil. And imagine somebody coming and saying, I have something positive to say about this king. He wasn't just bad to these individuals who are so good. He's actually bad to everyone. Does that make the king look any better? On the contrary, it makes the king look worse. In other words, don't say that he's so bad because look how he treated these good people. No. I have something positive to say. He actually treats everyone that way. So that's what you're saying. He gave it over to a system, and the system doesn't distinguish. So it's just not one tzaddik or two tzaddikim. It's everyone like that. In other words, it makes no difference. It's contradictory. What you're saying doesn't make any sense. On the contrary, for such a king, everybody would get up, rebel against him, regardless of what their fate would be. Nobody would stand something like that. Now, as far as your other argument about how the wicked are so successful, how they prosper and do so well, they're not getting punished, and they should get punished, and it should be done in public so people should see what happens to the wicked, so that everyone should know that this is from Shamayim, that this is from heaven, that it's coming to them. You should know, it doesn't work like that with Hashem. Hashem is different from an ordinary king. An ordinary king who wants to punish the rebels, who wants to punish the criminals for what they did, would do so for two reasons. First of all, not all crimes are known. A lot of crimes are not known to the king. When a crime is discovered, the king wants to punish immediately the offender, the criminal, in order that he should not commit additional crimes. So he wants to put a stop to it right away. Plus, the king does not have all the abilities to do whatever he wants, whenever he wants. And therefore, he would punish this individual as soon as possible because he doesn't want him to run away. He may hide. And if he hides, he won't be able to punish him. So a mortal king has reasons why he would want to punish immediately. Hashem does not have to hurry. Hashem knows everything. Hashem is aware of everybody. You can't hide from Hashem. He can decide when he wants to punish. And besides, if he were to punish right away, what did we say before? A very important point, which is very, very true. Punishing right away would remove free will. It would interfere with it. And part of this whole idea of what Hashem wants to accomplish with the creation of man is to enable him to have complete free will. Well, I shouldn't say complete, but complete free will in how he behaves, in how he reacts, in how he handles certain situations. We do not have free will to do just anything we want. But in order for man to have free will, Hashem cannot force him, cannot, just make him a robot to do what Hashem would want him to do. Because ultimately we're dealing with a system that also includes the concept of reward and punishment. What are we here for? Hashem wants us to reward. Hashem wants to reward us. And how is he going to do that if we do things automatically? So by punishing the evildoer right away, it would become obvious that Hashem is involved, Hashem is around, Hashem watches, and everybody would have to behave. That's not free will. So therefore, Elihu tells Iyov, it's sufficient for man to know that Hashem sees everything, watches over everything, he has the ability to punish whenever he wants, and therefore who are we to give him advice when to do it and how to do it? And as the commentaries explain, it would have been nice, it would have been a good idea for Hashem to destroy the Rashaim in the following way. Imagine there's an earthquake, and the righteous amongst the people, the victims, survive, and the wicked do not. Wouldn't it be nice if that would happen? An earthquake, which is from Shamayim, and it would be clear who was righteous and who was not. Or that Hashem should just eliminate the wicked and instead bring down into this world good people in their place. Of course, Hashem can do all of that. He doesn't, obviously. That's not the kind of world that he wants. He doesn't do it, at least in the open. Quietly, Hashem does, of course, take care of those who are evildoers. Just that he does it in a quiet way that people should not realize that it's from him. In order for them to actually think, oh, what a coincidence. Or, wow, this place always has earthquakes or hurricanes. You got to be careful. Let people think. Hashem allows people to think what they want to think and doesn't in any way influence them, unless, of course, one studies. Doesn't allow them to think, oh, this is from heaven, because that will take away their free will. There are people, of course, who know the truth, who know that this is all a sign from Shamayim, but not everybody's paying attention. And therefore, the wicked continue to do that which is wrong. You would think that they would stop. No, they continue because they actually think there's such a thing as coincidence, there's such a thing as Mother Nature. Hashem is not involved. And because of the way they think, they continue to do their bad deeds. Ultimately, all it takes is a little bit of intelligence for someone to come to the conclusion, you know why Hashem is concealed in this world? Very simple. Because He wants people to have free will. Otherwise, wouldn't it be nice if you could just prove it black and white scientifically? Look, God exists. No, it can never happen. Never. You can come close, but never will it be so clear and convincing because Hashem does not want it. That would take away His whole plan of giving man free will. Therefore, Elihu continues on to say, you see it throughout history, the poor crying out to Hashem, people getting killed, people suffering, and Hashem is not helping them, Hashem is not always saving them. Does that mean that Hashem does not listen to them? Hashem does listen to the cry of the poor. Hashem is aware of all of this. But sometimes what happens is that Hashem uses a particular wicked man, uses him. He didn't tell him to do it, but He uses him to punish those who deserve to be punished. They can be poor, they can be simple people, but it doesn't make a difference. Hashem sometimes uses that individual who would do harm anyway, makes him the messengers to bring about punishment to an entire nation. As the Pasuk says, Oy Ashur Shevet Api. Ashur, Assyria, was the rod that Hashem used to punish. He is the rod of my anger, my fury. So Hashem uses them, powerful nation, an empire, to go and conquer. And in the midst of conquering, they kill. And who do they kill? Innocent victims as well. So sometimes Hashem would allow this to happen, using the evil doer as a messenger, as a rod, to punish individuals that need to be punished. But what would happen to this evildoer? You think he's just going to get away with that? He's evil nonetheless. In the meantime, he will receive the strength through Hashem. He will receive the strength from Hashem to continue, and he will survive, and he will conquer, and he will be very powerful, up until the time that Hashem decides it's time for you to come down. Empires have come up and have come down. And since we're talking about empires, the Zohar says something incredible, that all those leaders, all those kings who committed such terrible atrocities against the Jews in the past, they were never punished. They died perhaps in their sleep, perhaps a natural death. What about them? Where's their punishment that we should see it with our eyes? We want to see it, not just that in Gehenom they're going to pay for it. So the Zohar says that there will come a time right before Mashiach comes when certain individuals that were very, very bad, Hashem brings them back in a reincarnation. And they become kings again, or people in power, in positions of power. And they will commit certain atrocities. They will have some power. And Hashem will bring them down so that we can see it. That's what happened with Saddam Hussein. Some say that he was really a reincarnation of someone in the past, perhaps even Nebuchadnezzar, who he himself claimed he was a reincarnation. But anyway, we don't know for sure. We do know that this is what the Zohar says, that right before Mashiach comes, there will be certain individuals that will come back reincarnated so that they can be punished physically, not just in the afterlife. So if Hashem wants to punish a nation, He sometimes puts someone in power to wage war. And you wonder, what do they want? What are you doing? And it could not make any sense whatsoever, like this irrational war between Russia and Ukraine. But there's a reason behind it. There's definitely a reason behind it. It's not just people making a decision on their own. It's all orchestrated from above. Certain people are being punished. So you will see, when certain individuals or a nation has to be punished, that either a certain leader will rise, have control, survive for a while, carry out his evil plan, perhaps succeed to a certain extent, or it's not one individual, it will be the masses. The masses who unfortunately in the past have committed many, many pogroms, if you know what that means, against many, many people. Thousands of people were killed by the Khmelnytsky gangs and by other individuals throughout Europe. Masses of people who just got up, ignorant, angry, with terrible hatred and prejudice against Jews and against others as well. How could this happen? It's all from Shamayim. We have to remember that this is all from Shamayim. They didn't just one day get up and decide to do so. So Hashem sometimes brings a dictator. He puts him to power. It could be Stalin, it could be Genghis Khan, it could be anyone. And that individual goes after a nation, another nation, or after individuals, and sends them off to Siberia, or whatever. It's all from Shamayim. So you cannot come and complain to Hashem. Why is it that you tolerate the wicked? Why do you give them so much strength? Hashem has His reasons. That's all we need to know. We may have some idea sometimes, that there's obviously something here going on, that these people deserve it somehow. We will never know. We will never know the reasons why Hashem is doing it. But He has a reason. So as Elihu continues on to say, do you think that you can show Hashem something that He doesn't see? That you can make Him aware of something that He's unaware? And in this way, Hashem will say, oh, I didn't know. I'm going to do it differently now. I'm going to change my mind. You cannot give Hashem information that He doesn't have. You cannot reveal to Him something that He doesn't see. He sees everything. He knows everything. So what are you trying to do with Iyov? You're trying to say something that Hashem doesn't know, and therefore that's why He's doing it this way, because He's not aware. No. And besides that, you shouldn't really complain at all of why certain things happen, why the evil succeed, and why the righteous are suffering. He's not asking you to pay here. In other words, He's not demanding it of you, that just because, certain things happen that Hashem is very unhappy about, is coming after you. Now you pay for this. No. In other words, this does not relate to you, what's happening in the world. The bigger picture should not be your concern. And if that's the case, Hashem, Elihu, tells Iyov, you know what? It's none of your business. Don't get involved. Don't get involved over here. You are not the one that's going to make a determination here because of information that you have. So he goes on to say, Iyov, if you really had something additional to say, go ahead. But I can assure you that you will not say anything different than what you've said in the past. And everything that you've said in the past doesn't make any sense, not from experience and not intellectually, not philosophically. What you said does not add up at all. Now, what I will do, Elihu says, is I will continue to argue with you until I rebut all your arguments, until I make sure you have no questions left. The reason why I want to do that is because I want to make sure that all those heretic thoughts that you have are completely gone, disappear. Because if you continue thinking the way you do, you're going to continue weakening your emunah. Your faith will be weak. Even though you're sitting with us and we all believe in Hashem, but if you continue in this way, that's what's going to happen eventually. And you know what? It's a very interesting point, this, because there have been, unfortunately, a lot of people in the past, very knowledgeable individuals who, because of philosophy and because of other reasons, got carried away, moved away from pure faith in Hashem, accepting everything with pure faith. They started rationalizing. And we are told, for example, that in Spain, during the time of the Inquisition, it was the simple people, the simple men and women who had a simple faith, not very smart, not very knowledgeable. They were the ones that were able to give their life for what they believe. In no way in the world did they accept to be converted. If they could run away, they ran away. You know who did convert, unfortunately? It was the smart people, the knowledgeable ones, the ones who thought perhaps of a way to rationalize how they can perhaps have their cake and eat it too, dress up like a Christian on the outside, and somehow hide your Judaism or completely convert. You can't play those games. And they were the ones who were smart and educated, and they knew everything. They knew halakha, they knew everything. They had a hard time. They didn't have that pure faith. And that's what's necessary sometimes. It's not to ask, why is this happening to me? I'm a good person. Imagine somebody who has a high position in the government, and they tell them, you got to convert. Otherwise, this is what's going to happen to you. Either you lose your job, or worse, you'll be burnt at the stake. So he starts rationalizing, I have such a good job. Maybe I'll just disguise myself. Begins to think how to get away with it. No. Don't you realize that this is a challenge? This is a test from Shamayim. Pick yourself up and leave if you can. Or if you have to, give your life. This is a big mitzvah. Many others have. It takes courage, but it takes more than just courage. It takes faith, clear faith. And the simple people had clear faith. This is what our forefathers did too when they were faced with this kind of situation. It's not the first time. And unfortunately, those that gave up quickly, their descendants are gone, totally assimilated. And some of them intermarried, of course. They may know what their origins are, what their roots are, but they're no longer practicing. Unless one of their children or grandchildren, one of their descendants wakes up one day and says, I feel that I'm attracted to this. I come from this. I want it again. This has happened, it happens all the time, depending on how divine their soul is. And Hashem, of course, helps these people come back. But it's very, very sad, because people who begin to rationalize why certain things are happening, they're going to fall. They're going to fall for the evil inclination who tempts them in all kinds of ways. It's best if you keep your position, because you may have influence over other people in this position. And of course, that was not always the right thing to do. Abarbanel, who was a great commentator, famous advisor to the king, this individual, Abarbanel, was told by the king, please, stay. I love you. I want your friendship. I want your advice. I want you around here. If my people are leaving, I'm leaving with them. No reason to think about it. He was very, very clear about, what he's going to do. Imagine high salary, position of power. No, nothing helped. He understood that this was the right thing for him to do, was to leave. So Elihu was telling Iyov the same idea. At some point, if I don't make sure that no questions are left in your mind, no doubts, you're going to continue to sin. In other words, you're going to continue to say things that are totally not proper. This was chapter 34. In chapter 35, Elihu addresses another point that Iyov made. We don't have free will. On the contrary, everything about us is dictated from above, how we're going to be. We're going to be good people or bad people. You're just born like that. And that's what some people claim these days too, with certain weaknesses that they had. I was born like that. All right, you know what? Let's say you were. But did you know that you have the ability to control, to change certain things, to mitigate them? You have to want to, first of all. That's where the problems begin. Not everybody wants to. If you want to, it's possible. It's not possible to change completely. Certain things cannot be changed. Certain things that we are born with, we have genes. You can't just change those genes. You can't change the DNA. Certain things will always remain, but you have a soul, you have a mind, you're not an animal, and therefore you have free will. And that free will gives you certain powers to enable you to overcome, not change, overcome certain weaknesses. So therefore, Iyov is completely wrong in what he says, that things are dictated from above, that's the way they have to be. There's no free will whatsoever. And what we do, in the end, Hashem is fully aware of it from even before we were born. There were people who actually thought like that. And that amounts to being a puppet. And we know that that's not true. But back then, we're talking about people having all kinds of ideas. They didn't have a Torah. They were not taught that this is the correct philosophy, this is the correct way of looking at things. And some people thought everything is dictated and you can't change it. So Iyov was saying that if everything is forced upon you, then the deeds that we perform are not really deeds that come about through free will, and there's no reward and punishment, therefore, because it's not we who decided. It was already determined from before. Now comes a big surprise. This is a beautiful explanation that really sheds a lot of light as to how reward and punishment works. Elihu, now in turning to Iyov, says, not only are you wrong in thinking that way, but even your friends did not really understand this point I'm about to explain very well. And that is how reward and punishment works. You all have this understanding, wrong understanding, that Hashem asks of you to do certain things because He needs it. In other words, when you do a mitzvah, a good deed, you're doing it for Him. Somehow you affect Him. When you do something wrong, somehow you affect Him. That's totally wrong. Hashem doesn't need anything. He didn't have to create the world. He didn't have to bring us into this world. He doesn't need anything. When man does something, whether good or bad, he's doing it to himself. In the end, it's for his own good, for his own benefit. Every mitzvah, the entire Torah, is for our benefit. It's for our individual, personal benefit, plus as a society. And that's what Elihu clarifies here. There's something about a normal, functioning society. When people are good to each other and there's laws in place, courts, police, everything is working, no corruption, everything is just, then there wouldn't be any crime whatsoever. I mean, there would be some perhaps, right? But they would be punished. They would be put away. Look what's happening today in the world. I mean, there's anarchy. Governments are falling apart. Very liberal. They don't realize that even democracy has limits. But as a result of corruption, as a result of not following the Torah way of life, many, many terrible things happen in this world. So from the non-Jewish world, you can't expect, of course, that they do everything right. But at the very least, there's 7 Noahide laws, of which one is to establish a system of laws. Okay. The problem is, which laws? Should we legalize abortion or not? See, this is where the problems begin. But the founders of this nation, at the very beginning, who were a little bit closer to God, had no questions about what is right and what is wrong. Then why do people today have these questions? Simple answer, because they moved away from God. They threw him out of the school. No, don't mix religion with school. Right? Separation of church from state. And I understand why they wanted to separate the two. But they took it too far. The church had a lot of power in the past. Yeah, but it's one thing the church, another thing God. Why did you just leave God in the penny? In God we trust. Why just there? Yeah. When you remove God from your life, then there's all kinds of things that people are going to think. Let me decide whether I want to keep the baby or not. You should make that decision? Who would have thought like that? Yeah, but that's what happens when people don't have a proper understanding of what life is for. That we have free will, that we are accountable, responsible. There is reward and punishment. God is aware. He is? Well, if He is aware and there is a God, then how come there's so much pain and suffering? The same question Iyov posed, more or less. Just that they didn't have Elihu to deal with them. So Elihu makes it very, very clear. The deeds that we perform are not for Hashem. Hashem doesn't need it. We don't make any difference in Him if we do something right or wrong. You can't change Him. So the deeds that we perform is ultimately for us, for our benefit. Elihu explains in different words, if this would be true, that what you do is necessary for Hashem, then you would have a valid point. It's not coming to you, all this pain and suffering, because you're a righteous man, you did only good. See, that's where you made the mistake. It's not that you did Hashem a favor, and because you did Him a favor, He has to pay you back. No. Then Elihu goes on to say, now look to the heavens. Look to the heavens and see how the celestial bodies are so distant from you. Do you actually think that those celestial bodies can actually force you, can actually influence you, can actually make a difference in you? Even though we do know the mazal from above does reach here, even though it's so distant, but they don't force you. And in the same way that they don't force you, neither can you affect Hashem, the more so, who's much further than everything else. How could you even imply that they have such a powerful influence as to force you to do certain things? So you cannot make a change in Hashem, neither can they make a change in you. What about the fact that it does say that Hashem is upset sometimes, He's angry? Not that He really gets angry, because He's not human, but these are just terms that are used to describe to us that Hashem is not happy with our ways. In order human beings to understand and to relate to how Hashem deals with this world, the Torah uses terms that human beings understand. It doesn't mean that Hashem is actually angry, the way we know what anger is. You cannot give anything to Hashem, everything is His. And what happens in the end when an evildoer does do evil things, he is hurting society, he's hurting the people around him, or he's hurting himself. In the end, the reward and punishment, the mitzvah or the averah, the good deed or the sin, affects us directly. It does not affect Hashem. Hashem doesn't need it. He therefore wanted us to benefit, society to benefit, to function properly, and for human beings to benefit, because a human being who does the right thing actually becomes shalem. He actually becomes a better person. He's refining himself. The mitzvot are intended to refine our character. So if we do something, it's not that He needs it, it's for yourself, for your sake. So therefore, how could you ask for Hashem to punish the wicked? If Hashem Himself does not have any benefit or in any way is hurt directly from it. The commentaries give another example. Imagine a sick person who followed the doctor's instructions and as a result of that remained healthy. Should he thank the doctor? No. He can thank himself for following the instructions. Because he followed the instructions, he remained healthy. Had he not followed the instructions, he's to blame himself. So it's all about yourself. In other words, you have the ability to follow Hashem's instructions or not to follow the instructions. It's not that you're doing something for Him. You're doing it to yourself. As it says in the Torah, if you follow my statutes, you will have rain, you will not have war, your economy will prosper. Just follow the Torah. People ask, what's going on? Why is there anti-Semitism? Why do we suffer so much as a nation? As individuals, it's all mazal for the most part. People have their own mazal. But as a nation, when an entire nation is suffering, being threatened by war, it's because the nation is not doing its job. So Hashem has to communicate with us in some way, let us know. How are we going to find out? He doesn't talk to us directly. So the Torah tells us, you will find out through this system, the weather, the economy, and through war. If you have any problems in those areas, then you know that you're not doing what you're supposed to do. If you don't follow the doctor's instructions, is the doctor going to punish you? No. You're just not going to be healthy. You're going to be sick. You're yourself to blame. So the reward and the punishment are in the actual deed. In other words, what will the deed do for us? Will it harm us or will we benefit from this? Society also. Will society gain or not gain depending on if they enforce the laws, they do things properly, and if they don't enforce the laws and they don't do things properly, then what will happen? Anarchy, revolutions, problems. So Hashem let the human being decide how he wants to behave, or society how they want to behave. It could be a very corrupt society, it could be an evil society as we've had in the past, like Sodom and Gomorrah. Terrible people. Look what happened. Look back in history. A lot of places were destroyed completely. Nobody knows why. But even volcanoes that are destructive and come and wipe out towns, there's a reason for it. It depends how the society lived. They could be the ones to blame if things go wrong. And he finishes the chapter by saying, just look at animals. Animals were given certain instincts, abilities, and they know how to protect themselves. They want to survive too. If they sense a danger, they try to protect themselves. And he goes and describes birds. Birds somehow sometimes call to their friends, other birds, so that they can help each other protect themselves, defend themselves from the enemy that is approaching. Singing birds. Why would they sing? Why would they call out? Because they sense a threat. And if you've seen videos of animals, birds, they all have this instinct built in where they sense danger. They try to run away and hide. And it's not only that. Hashem gave them certain tools, equipped them with either camouflage or horns or some other means to protect themselves. Yeah. It may not always help them, but at least each one has the ability to protect themselves. And they all want to live. So towards the end of this chapter, Elyahu says there's a lot that we can learn from animals. Because if that's the case with animals, that they want to live, they want to survive, and they have the ability to sense danger, then the more so the human being who's the crown of creation should be able to detect certain things and should want to watch out for the criminals, for the gangs, for the murderers. So if you complain about the fact that so many poor people are crying out to Hashem and Hashem is not listening, first of all, you should know Hashem does listen and Hashem is aware, number one. But the reason why it's happening is not because Hashem doesn't listen. The reason why it's happening is because evil has overtaken good. If you have a lot of crime, it's because gangs of evil people have taken over and they have the control, and that's what's causing all these problems. It's a sign, it's an indication that society is rotten when things are so bad. So whose fault is it? Not Hashem. Hashem just is allowing these things to happen because it's up to us what we want to make of ourselves as individuals and as a society. Yeah. Unfortunately, the evil has become very, very strong, very powerful sometimes. Corruption, and it just destroys a nation. You see it throughout history, what corruption has done. So it is incumbent upon us. Elihu says it's incumbent upon man to do what is right if he wants to survive. Don't blame Hashem for why things are the way they are. Blame man. So therefore, in conclusion, Hashem is aware. Hashem knows exactly what is happening, and there will be judgment at the time that He decides. But you, Iyov, have been created for a certain mission as well. And you know what part of your mission is? He was like a judge too. It was your responsibility to do whatever you can to eliminate any evil that you saw. And you didn't do that. You were more concerned about yourself perhaps. You were not as concerned about everyone else. You did not try hard enough to eradicate evil from your midst. And therefore, Elihu hints to him that this is a possibility of why these things happen to you, why it happened to your children, to your possessions, that everything, of course, was affected because you didn't act the way you could have. And sometimes this is going to be something that from Shemaim they're going to demand of us. If you could have had the ability to influence someone, to encourage him, to say a nice word, and you didn't, and that would have made a difference in his life, you're going to be blamed for it. You know, you could have helped in a very, very cheap way, easy way. Why didn't you do it? You had to just care a little bit more about the individual, and you didn't. You just thought about yourself. Sometimes we could stop things from happening if we get involved. We have to use our judgment. But people tend to ignore, people tend not to care. So this is the way Elihu finishes the chapter by saying, for this alone, you would deserve to be punished. And it could be, of course, that he's saying, this is why you suffered so much. But in reality, as we're going to see later on, we know the truth. If you read the first chapter, the main idea behind all the suffering is not necessarily something that he deserved, but as a test. But Elihu, in the process of arguing with Iyov, demolishes every one of his arguments that Iyov had. He's saying, oh, it must be a system in place. It cannot be Hashem. It must be that we don't have free will. It must be that everything is predetermined. It doesn't make sense. And Iyov says, what you're saying doesn't make any sense. Hashem is fully aware. But who are we to tell him what to do, how to do it? He knows exactly what's going on. And when he chooses the time that he decides, then of course justice will be brought. And when we see the evildoers getting away with it, it appears that they're getting away with it. They're not. Hashem is tolerant. And Hashem is tolerant for other reasons too that are not mentioned in this book. Is sometimes Hashem gives the evildoer a chance to do teshuvah. Hashem knows that this man has a spark of divinity in him. He's crazy now. He's drunk. He's on drugs. He's very upset. One day he's going to come back. We don't know that. Hashem knows it. And sometimes he lets people, live on even though they're not so good. And it also could be because they will have good children. They may not be so good, but be careful with him because his children will be good. And that's what the rabbis tell us. A father should be very careful when he writes his last will not to disown any child, even though that child is a rebel, even though that child may not be so good. You don't know what will be of him in the future. You don't know what will be of his children, your own grandchildren. Don't disown him completely. Give him a chance. Hashem, who's our Father, loves every one of us, and He knows how capable we are, how much potential we have. For sure, wants us to give us a chance. And that is what the prophet says. I would rather the evil man not die. I would rather him live and return to me. And right before Mashiach comes, this is what Hashem is doing. He's really holding off from bringing Mashiach to enable more and more people to do teshuvah, because after Mashiach comes, everything will be so obvious. We won't have such free will as we have it right now. Hashem wants us to return to Him through our free will, because that is when we will be rewarded. If we don't have free will, then it's obvious, then there's no such a reward. So before Mashiach comes, before things become so crystal clear, Hashem will give more and more people the chance to return, to awaken. He will send us signs, and hopefully many people will return to Him.
Amen.